Hello, everybody. This is the progress report for this Wednesday. By God, it's almost the middle of June.
Unbelievable.
And here we are on Wednesday, June 13th. And, because it's June, that means, and it's the first year of the term, the first session is ending. The biennium. We are just about to finalize the state budget for the next biennium. We schedule our budgets for 2 years, and every first session of a term is a major amount of the effort on both the House and the Senate is in crafting the state budget, which, as my good friend Lou D'Alessandro says many times, affects every citizen of New Hampshire, every citizen. And we're going to talk about that. And we're pleased to have not only Lou D'Alessandro, Chair of Senate Finance and the Dean of Senate, but Mary Heath, who works in Division 2 of House Finance and is an expert on the budget as well. And normally we'd be talking about just the differences between the budget as passed by the House and then the more recent budget as approved after a marathon, 10-hour session
Right, yes.
you had going late at night
Right.
in the Senate. But this time we have a additional complication is which form of the budget or which combination, when we come to a compromise on the issues in dispute, will get past a gubernatorial veto, and what happens if the governor does issue a veto. A lot to get to right now, a lot to get to, more than we can probably cover an hour, but we got the right people here. But I wanted to turn it over to Mike Farley because he has something to entertain us.
Well, I want to start with grab your popcorn now because there's going to be, we're going to have a lot to talk about. But, we're going to continue with the sometimes feature on the show, the new feature that we call Libsplaining. I am going to today have a very brief libsplanation of impeachment. It's a word that has been more and more frequently heard on the news. It makes people nervous. It makes people angry. It gets people's blood boiling.
Hey, it makes me smile.
Well, some people it makes smile. But I want to very, very briefly explain. The word's been thrown around a lot, and most of the time it's not used accurately. So I want to explain this. And I'm going to start off with a question, and we'll get around to the answer later. Was Richard Nixon impeached? Now let's move on. Impeachment comes from the Constitution of the United States. This is not a bad congressional thing. This is not a democratic thing. The founders of our country added it to our Constitution in the main body. It's not even an amendment. Article 2, which deals with the presidency and the executive branch, Section 4, the whole section deals with impeachment. 31 words. The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. None of those words are defined. Now,
But they do have a certain grand ring to them,
don't they? And it makes sense. Who can argue that if a president commits treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors, he should not be removed from office? I think we can all agree that the impeachment clause of the United States is good policy. It's a great clause. It's part of our heritage. And if you don't like it, you're not a patriot. Now, what does that mean to our everyday life?
Indeed.
For example, if Chairman Nadler of the Judiciary Committee, and under the House rules, the Judiciary Committee would do the work because everything in the Congress is done by a committee, so that committee would deal with the question of whether or not to impeach. If Jerry Nadler opens up an impeachment proceeding to take evidence on whether or not the president has committed wrongdoing, is that impeachment? No, it is not impeachment. It is oversight, which is part of the Constitution, and if you don't like it, you're not a patriot. Oversight is a good thing. It is what keeps us from having a king and a queen. We've done it for 230-something years, if not more. The next step is the committee that takes all the evidence will say, okay, do we have enough grounds to report out a charge of impeachment against the president? They may vote on it. They may vote yes. They may vote no. If they vote yes, then it goes to the whole Congress. The Congress is a good thing. It is part of our country's government. It is in the Constitution. If you don't like the Congress, you're not patriotic. The Congress will then take a vote. The Congress represents us. If by majority vote, they decide that, yes, indeed, the findings of the Judiciary Committee are well-founded and we should impeach the president, they will vote on it and they will vote yes. That, and only that, is the mechanism that impeaches the president. Is the president out of office? No, he is not out of office. Then there has to be another round of fact-finding where the Senate acts as the jury and decides whether the Congress has enough evidence to warrant a finding that the president has committed treason, bribery, or other crimes and high crimes and misdemeanors. Only then will the president be removed from office. So to get back to our first question that we began this with, was Richard Nixon impeached? No, he was never impeached. We have only had two presidents impeached, Andrew Johnson and Bill Clinton. Richard Nixon, the Judiciary Committee reported out a recommendation that he be impeached, but he had the good judgment and the class to resign before they actually impeached him. We will not see this time around. So, folks, if Jerry Nadler opens up a committee hearing, the president is not being impeached. If people are subpoenaed to come and testify as to what happened during the president's time in office, that is not impeachment. Do not be alarmed. It is oversight. It is what the Congress has to do, and if they're not doing it, they're not doing their job. So with that, I will leave you with today's libsplanation of impeachment.
You rest this case.
I rest my case.
Well, let me just say that I participated in an impeachment because we impeached the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court
I remember
in the
that
state of
very
New
well.
Hampshire.
Yep.
We've only done that twice in the history of the state of New Hampshire. And he was impeached by the House, and the trial was held before the New Hampshire State Senate. He was acquitted before the New Hampshire State Senate, but indeed we didn't. He was impeached. He was tried. He was acquitted at the trial, as Bill Clinton was acquitted by the Senate, as Andrew Johnson was acquitted by the Senate.
By one vote.
Well, and there are those who look at the situation in New Hampshire and say there was much more to that case than met the eye. I'll tell you that without any hesitation at all.
I think that I would be one of those people.
Well, and I think very unique case. Manchester's own Jimmy Craig was on the Judiciary Committee in the House and was a strong voice for the impeachment. And it was a long, drawn-out process. And we had, the New Hampshire State Senate had George Mitchell as our attorney.
Yep,
Who was the majority leader in the United States Senate, distinguished lawyer.
Negotiate the Good Friday agreements.
Yes, he did. He was with the Irish agreements and has had a wonderful, wonderful reputation as a marvelous attorney and a wonderful U.S. senator.
And a judge.
And a judge. He gave up a judgeship to run for the Senate.
Yeah.
Senator, I'm sure you'll agree with me, though, that impeachment is a part of our Constitution.
Absolutely.
It is a part of our government. It is a job to be done when necessary, and people shouldn't shy away from it. Am I in agreement with you on that?
There's no question. You should never shy away from it if indeed the cause is just. It is a way to get that individual out of office. Sure, and that's why it's so rarely used, because of the fact that a preponderance of the evidence must come forward before the House of Representatives. And I applaud Nancy Pelosi in holding the reins of her caucus back, because there are those who want to jump into this, and without all of the evidence, you've got to have all of the evidence. And as I say, it's one steep undertaking.
Yep.
And one that causes controversy, and in most instances is never really settled. It's just never really settled.
Yeah.
Well, as most political questions,
Right.
and it is a
those
political
are
schism. But I do not want to take another minute.
No
offense to the senator, but we have.
I think we definitely need to move right ahead. We have two outstanding experts here on the state budget. Crunch time is coming.
Yes.
By the end of this month, we have to have a state budget for the next biennium, 2 years. $13 billion overall, something like that?
Yeah, the budget that we presented is actually it's $12.9 billion over the biennium.
Yeah. So That's a lot of money, and it does a
Yes.
lot of
Before we
things.
jump into the talking about what's in the budget, given the really aggressive tone of the governor's threat to veto what hasn't even been decided yet, I think he's jumping the gun a bit. He's trying to tell you what he wants, of course. What happens if we do not pass a budget, or if he vetoes it and you can't override it, you go back and you keep working on it? But the fact of the matter is, with the continuing resolution under
Yes.
the current tax cuts, et cetera, it's really not an acceptable solution, is it?
A continuing resolution would be a disaster.
Yes, I agree with
I
that.
wanted to lead off with
Yeah,
that
an
we really
an
need to get
absolute
this budget
disaster.
passed.
Why would it be a disaster?
Because everything that's in place now continues. The tax cuts continue. You go to 7.7, and the second year you go to 7.
So needs go up and
7.5.
revenues go down.
Well, then the revenue that we have remains in place.
Right.
And all of the good things that are in this budget, and I think the governor really agrees with it. I didn't find his tone to be very difficult. I think he gave a press conference, he presented his views. I mean, we differ with him, but there is an area of compromise, and I think he's going to have to listen to the House and the Senate as we have to listen to him. You know, this is a three-way game. People don't understand that this is a three-pronged attack. It's the House, it's the Senate, it's the governor, and the three entities must get together and produce a document that's favorable for the people of the state of New Hampshire.
And that's what's important.
And that's the key issue. And we have mental health problems.
Yep.
We've got the addiction problem. We've got safety problems. We've
Schools,
got problems.
schools,
with the
serious
school
education problems,
serious
yes.
Yeah.
But
Funding problems.
yeah, and all of those are basically solved to a point in this budget. I might say I've worked on the budget for 22 years in the Senate. I find this to be the best document we've put forward in a long period of time.
When you say "we," you're talking about the Senate or the Senate and the
I
House?
can only talk about the Senate.
Okay.
And I like to think that we in the House sent you a magnificent budget from which to work, Senator.
Well, everything provides a base. The governor
That's
provided
right.
the initial document, looked over by the House, and then brought to the Senate. So, listen, the idea is improvement, always improving on things
Yes.
and making them better.
Yeah.
And I think that's
You know,
kind
it
of
may
where
be
we
just
stand.
worth reminding people that care about this, and I hope our viewers do. The whole process starts with the governor's budget
Yes.
message. Then it's the House.
Yes,
Then it comes to the Senate,
yes,
because you are the senators after all.
yes.
And you have probably the best information because you have the
last look.
The last look
And
at
the latest revenue
and the latest
information.
revenue
That's what's
estimates.
important. They have a lot more
And
revenue.
then it's
Right.
back
By the time it gets
essentially
to
when
them.
you and Mary and the House and the
Yeah.
Senate come to an agreement, which I certainly expect will happen and
Well, I
should
hope
happen.
so.
Then it's back to the governor again, and he decides whether to take the whole package or veto it and send us into a continuing resolution, which you both agree would be a disaster.
And he has to
Yeah.
take or leave the whole package, right?
That's
We don't have a
correct.
line item veto
We don't
here
have
in
line
New
item
No
veto
line
in New
item.
Hampshire, no.
So,
Which is a good thing. I
Yes, I do too.
yeah, I think
agree
so
with that.
too.
we wouldn't want that.
No. I mean, look at what happens in Massachusetts.
I know.
and
Let me just
with
say
the
to
line
Brian that
item.
I think because we got so much to cover today, I don't think we're going to take our usual breaks. if
I'm
that's
willing to
okay
do
with
that. If you think we
I
can go
mean,
a whole hour without stopping for a
I mean,
break,
you know,
I'm willing to do
we
that.
haven't even started on any of the particular items, and here we are being told it's time for our first break. So I really thought this show would be about having the two of you explain your positions on the differences
Right.
between the House budget and the Senate budget. I'm going to invite you to do that, but
Okay.
I think the common good that you both want to represent probably overwhelms that. But why don't we
Yes.
talk about that? For example, the House budget call for what turned out to be, would have been a very limited amount of a capital gains tax to supplement the interest and dividends tax. And Lou, as the chairman of the Senate Finance, and your colleagues did not
No.
agree with that.
No,
And
we-
we'll talk
we-
about that and why.
Sure,
why you didn't.
happy to. If we could begin with a quick overview and then get into the
That's a good idea.
particulars.
Yeah, let's do that.
Let's do that. Let's talk about four particular items. What our revenue is, what our appropriations are, what the state aid is, and what the Revenue Stabilization Fund receives from this budget. The General Fund and Educational Trust, this is the two components of our budget, the General Fund and the Education Trust. In 2009, where we are right now, 2019, that represented about $2.7 billion. $2.7 billion.
Combined.
Yes. Now, for 2021, the Senate Finance Committee estimates $5.4 billion in spending. 5.4. So you're going from 2.7 to 5.4. Remember those numbers because they're very, very significant. And when you look at this, it's an almost doubling of spending. Doubling of spending. In the Highway Fund, the revenue estimates were $225.6 million for 2019. They're $451.4 million for 2021. Think of that. Now think of those numbers in millions. The Fish and Game Fund. The Fish and Game Fund revenue estimates are $12.9 million in 2019. They're $25.8 million for 2021. So we have a stable situation when you look at the revenues. When you look at the revenues, the revenues that we looked at were higher than the original House estimates. They were higher because, A, we had a better look at the revenues because they
You
came
had a
in.
later look.
We had a later look at the revenues, and we also did significant tax reform. All right, we did significant tax reform, and that tax reform is going to be very beneficial to us as
What
we
is that
as we
tax
move
And
forward.
what is that? Is that eliminating the tax cuts that are coming in the future, or is that something different from that?
No. We looked at our tax code, and we're going to do conformity. That's the first thing. We are going to conform with the federal tax laws of
Okay.
2018. So we're going to conform. Had we been in conformity in the last biennium, instead of $100 million in revenue, we would have received $200 million in revenue based on repatriation and the changes made in the federal tax laws. So think of that, conformity. Then we're going to make changes in how people pay taxes. We're going to go to market-based sourcing, and we're going to use the single sales factor in terms of determining your tax responsibility.
What does that mean, Senator?
Well, 31 other states have accepted that. Market-based, and I don't want to be too sophisticated, but it's the market. It's where the product comes from. Single sales factor, where the product is sold. Very simple, very difficult in terms of its implementation. We've met with Revenue Administration. We're going to do market-based sourcing right away. We're going to do single sales factor in the second year. Very, very significant changes in our taxes.
And what taxes does that affect? What
Businesses.
Okay,
Business
so
taxes.
that's the business enterprise and business profits?
It's the business profits tax. The business enterprise tax remains pretty consistent
Okay.
because business enterprise is a tripartite tax. It's a tax on wages, it's a tax on interest, and it's a tax on dividends. That tax was created when Steve Merrill was governor of the state of New Hampshire in response to the Cabletron suit over the BPT.
Yep, we remember that.
All right, so we have the BPT and the BET, which are our business taxes, and we'll talk about what the tax rates are and how you got to stabilize those rates as part of this deal. You have to stabilize them where they are right now at 7.9% and the 0.64%, which is the BET, and we have the lowest business taxes in New England,
New
by the
England.
way, the lowest. So tax
So when
reform
you say
does a lot
stabilize,
for
that's
it.
good to
But keep them
stop the
right where they are.
decreases.
Stop the decrease that takes them to 7.7, 7.5, and reduces the business.
But your
business enterprise
opponents
tax.
on the other side of the
Yes.
aisle will say, well, these cuts in business taxes, insofar as they've been implemented in the last budget, have contributed to the boom here in New Hampshire. So why shouldn't we continue that by cutting them again?
Well, because we know that that's not true, and the governor admits that in his revenue projections. He says the anomaly caused by repatriation was worth $100 million, and everybody agrees to that. Everybody agrees. The reductions that were made in the tax rate, Bob, I think, show you that when we had the amnesty provision and we raised $17.9 million because people weren't paying their taxes,
Yeah.
more people showed up.
A lot of people wanted to get straight.
A lot of people wanted to get straight. They appeared on the tax rolls, and as a result of that, they're going to pay that. They're going to pay their taxes.
Now we know who they are.
Right,
where they're
now
at.
we
That's
know.
a good thing.
So right, the blanket is off, and that had a lot to do with where we are. So those numbers were good. The tax reform that I've just mentioned is going to keep us going and moving in the direction. Now, what about appropriations? That's how we spend all of this money. In 2021, we're going to spend 12.9 billion over the biennium. 5.5 billion of that is the general fund and the trust. All right? So we're going to spend 12.9, 5.5 is represents the general fund and the education trust. So look, I want to get quickly because I know Mary wants to talk and I want to hear her melodious tones of her voice
know
because
you
I
do.
love her dearly.
But you know what I want you to explain
Yes.
too, what the governor did initially with his budget?
Yes.
And he,
Consolidated.
Yes,
Yeah, right.
please.
But first, you
Yes.
got to tell us where the other billions are coming from.
Yes.
Which is basically from federal
Well,
aid
but the
of some
money,
sort.
money comes from three areas. Our taxes, all right, which we have a variety of taxes. We have a really significant numbers of taxes. Federal money and other funds. And other funds are highway funds and
Fees,
and
tolls,
Fees for
things,
services,
Right, fees,
yeah.
things like that. So we come from three areas, three distinct
And New
areas.
Hampshire has a lot of these fees as well. Whenever we try something new, and we always throw a fee in there for
We
the
have-
revenue stream to pay for it, right?
We do have a series of fees. And, it's a fee-for-service model, and we kind of accept that, and if you don't
Some of
use
us
it, you
do.
don't. Well, yeah.
well, it's necessary.
Right. If you don't use it, you don't pay. Let's talk about state aid, because that's the key. To the magnificent Mary Heath, who, as I said, I love dearly. When she was Assistant
We all
Commissioner of
do.
Education, she worked with me in constructing a budget and I can't tell you how helpful she was, to be honest. So approximately 95 million more in additional adequate education to the cities and towns and the public charter schools over the biennium. That brings the aid to a total of 1.9 billion. For the D'Alessandro revenue redistribution package, that's $40 million, $20 million a year of the biennium, goes back to the cities and towns. They can spend it on anything they want, 20% of it from
Okay.
population, 80% from free.
Here I'd like
reduced.
to interject something we heard from Doug Hall yesterday in
Yes.
Representatives Hall. Right, Mary?
Yes,
That's
thank
a
you.
good correlation, Hall and
You
Hall.
know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah,
I do.
He said, we have a terrible problem getting to an adequate funding of an adequate education. The adequacy is now, what, 3,000 some odd dollars?
$37.50, right?
And, no district, he says, educates a student for less than $12,000 a year. And then he says, but we have a constitutional obligation
Right.
to fund an adequate education. So why are you giving money to the municipalities for which there is no constitutional obligation and not devoting more of that money to education?
Because the Constitution says quite clearly and distinctly, which has been supported by the Supreme Court and the Superior Court, taxation in New Hampshire has to be across the board. You can't differentiate. That's why targeting aid is problematic.
Right.
All right. So the key
Fair and proportional or something.
Equal
Equal
and proportional.
Equal and proportional.
Equal and
Which
proportional.
the Supreme Court has made a mash out of that.
Well, I
but
think they have
nevertheless.
made a mash out of it, and as a result of that, you have great difficulty, really great difficulty. Had John Sununu not vetoed the Augenblick formula bill
I know.
when he was governor, this would have been solved, because we used,
Well, but we never
Those are-
fully funded
Well,
the Augenblick formula.
but he vetoed it. He vetoed
True.
it. This would have been pushed to the side basket. But a constitutional amendment would be required to do what you say, and I believe that. We tried to get it, a limited one passed in the Lynch administration, could not get it done. But that provision that says equal and proportional, that's damaging when you want to target the poorest district that needs the most money.
Okay. Can we hear
Sure.
from you on this, Mary?
Sure.
Because you're a strong advocate for public
I
education.
certainly
All
am.
your life.
I have been since I was
You've
20
been-
years old and
You've been
a
an
brand new baby
educator and
school
an advocate
teacher,
for
right?
public education.
When the governor's budget came to us, our first immediate concern, well, for me in Division 2, was looking at the elimination of the education trust. And that, to me, was almost against something that we held sacred, and to do away with the trust opened up the budget to be able to use all the surplus on other things. So one of the first things we did in the House was to make sure in House Bill 2 that we brought back the education trust. It would continue as a dedicated fund from the general fund. Now, we had it in perpetuity, and I know that in the Senate version, they are only doing it for the biennium. But in the House, for us, and I think, Bob, you've been with us all the way, the House took a poll of all its members, and our House members said that education was a priority. We talked about all the different things that were important. Our young new representatives, so many of them ran on the basis of increasing funding for education. So for us, that was our first priority. We also know that mental health is one of the things that really impacts education. So that was also one of our major concerns. But for us, we put education up in front, and we said, we're going to try something. We didn't have the luxury of the increases in revenue that the Senate has.
April, yeah, May.
And we knew that we had to find additional dollars. So we went with the capital gains. Now, in the first year of the budget, we pretty much, we put in stabilization just as the Senate has. And most of the things in the Senate are pretty consistent for the first year of the biennium. We fully funded catastrophic aid. Well, it's called special ed aid now. We also fully funded building aid, which I think the Senate reduced that a bit. But we also fully funded tuition and transportation. That was lowered a little bit in the Senate, but because they had, we got better figures and we knew we didn't need as much. The important thing that the House talked about was that for 2 years, we wanted to come up with a temporary solution to the problems around the adequacy formula. We've tinkered with that formula over the years, and we have reduced the amount.
I'm going to editorialize, never got it right. You haven't hit
That's right.
adequacy yet.
And the court says that too.
And
That's
that
the
goes
court
back
decision.
when I was in the House back in
Absolutely.
06 and 07.
And I will agree
Talking about
with
the
you.
recent decision out in Cheshire County.
The recent decision, the Conval decision, and the courts have said that the general court has not got the adequacy formula right. So it's up to us to fix it. So for us in the House, we said that this 2-year budget would be a temporary solution. One of the wonderful things that we did pass was a commission, and there's $500,000 funded in that commission, as it is in the Senate. So we're both very like-minded on that. The purpose of this commission is to really bring in the experts and come up with a solution for adequacy, so that in fact, we really honor that constitutional charge to us to make sure that every child has an opportunity to a fully funded, adequate education.
Have not such commissions already attempted that, or is this a new and different attempt? What makes this one different?
What the other groups have done, and that was the same argument that we heard in the House and in the Senate. We've done this many times before, and we still aren't there. We are getting rid of everything. We're starting with the experts. We're starting from ground zero. We're going to build a budget, a solution to adequacy, things that have not been considered before. We want
So a
to
new
be
approach.
the solution. We're going to come up with a new solution. We're going to build in the things that were never included in the adequacy formula that should have been in the first place. I mean, when you look at the costs, we fully funded catastrophic aid, but that's only one part of special education. And we do put an amount in the adequacy formula for the costs that are associated with special ed, but I think every single taxpayer in every single town and city across our state struggles with the costs associated with special ed. So was that correct, the way we did it? We don't know. So that's something that we really looked at, and we stepped forward, and we said we were going to be bold about this, and we went forward, and education was our priority. So that in the first year of the budget, we were right with the Senate, but in the second year of the biennium, that's where we stepped forward, and the difference between the two right now is $70 million. So I think what's going to happen next, we both in the House and Senate want many of the same things. So much of our budget is similar, and now it's figuring out how to come to a compromise during the committee of conference. Because, I mean, our goal is to pass a budget
Well,
that the House and Senate will accept.
Because
there's
the
no
alternative is not a good situation,
Well,
which we started with.
It's absolutely scary to
Yeah.
think, and the senator also already alluded to the fact, our school districts can't afford not to have stabilization funds this first year of the biennium. This is a disaster, and I think, Senator, you spoke to that.
Yes. We restored
And we saw
stabilization.
only Monday, the city of Manchester passed their budget, and a
Overrode
major
the
part
tax
of the
cut.
debate is what's going to happen up at the state with what we can put into our education budget for the school board.
Well,
here
with
in
both
Manchester.
versions, the House version and the Senate version, my city of Manchester wins. And that's much needed money for our schools and our municipality. So I think for us to pass a budget that we can sit down and come together on is the first priority. It's critical. Now, I don't know what the governor's going to do with it when he gets it, because there are things that he's already said that he won't accept. But FMLA, Family Medical Leave, is important in the House, it's
He just
important in
wants
the
no part of
Senate.
it. He says he wants a voluntary program, but I pointed out on this show, we already have a voluntary program today, right now. Anybody could offer it. You know, that's a voluntary program, and guess what? It doesn't work, so something has to be done. That's not a real option.
That's true. And then in the governor's budget, he had, I think originally, was it 65 million he had for the forensic hospital? Or
Yes.
no, it was 65 beds.
65
But it was,
beds, yeah.
I think,
26 million.
26 million.
Yeah, we've-
And
we've
the
adjusted
House
that.
took that out, and we put in money for planning. We felt like there wasn't enough information about where's it going to be. There were no architectural plans. There wasn't anything about staffing.
but the Senate's put some
As
money
much
back.
as I'm a
Yes.
firm believer that proper planning prevents poor performance, we need those beds, and we need them now.
We desperately do.
And I think that we should put the money in for the beds and plan at the same
No,
time.
but
We
the money-
cannot
the-
wait.
The money is in the Senate budget. If you want to talk
Yeah.
about that particular situation, the Senate addressed that, I think, straightforward. Put the money for the beds. Where's it going to be? It's going to be on the grounds of New Hampshire Hospital. Put a wing onto the existing facility, and it could be between 20 and 30 beds. But at the same time, we're going to take the children out of New
Yes.
Hampshire Hospital,
Which is-
put them where they belong.
We did that too.
In a much better
Yeah.
facility.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Renovate the existing facility so that you'll have space for 48 people, and that will alleviate the problem of people in the emergency rooms at the hospitals. They'll be able to
Yeah.
get into New Hampshire Hospital. So we addressed that head
Will
on.
will it ameliorate or alleviate the problem? Will there be no more people waiting in emergency rooms once these beds are in place?
Well, right now, if you look at the census, it would eliminate it. Now, we have a very serious problem with mental health, and that's not going
I know.
away.
I-
You know,
I-
that's
we-
not
we
going
all
away.
agree on that.
And what we have is we have problems occurring at a much earlier age, and going straight up, which I think is highly problematic for the system.
And compounded by the opioid crisis.
Right.
Yeah,
So, but
understood.
what
We've
we
got people ending up in jail right
Yeah,
now,
yeah.
and
Agree.
But what we have done through our budget takes care of that situation as we see it now, and does make room for the future. By creating those 48 new beds at New Hampshire Hospital, we've really done something, again, to attack the problem. Getting the children out and putting them in a proper environment where they have a recreation and other amenities that they need
That's critical.
is a critical issue,
Yep.
and it's the way to go in adding or creating the new secure psychiatric unit. Now, yesterday, I visited the secure psychiatric unit at the prison. And let me tell you, we've put a ton of money into that situation. You know, based on the holiday suit, we put $4 million more there. And they get very good treatment
Is it
at
a
the New Hampshire
first-class
State
facility?
Prison. It is.
It's
It
a
is a
first-class
first-class
facility.
It's just a question that they're being put into a corrective situation when they haven't been convicted of a
That's
crime.
the
I mean,
situation.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Right. But those that are adjudicated get good service, and men and women, because one wing is dedicated to women and one wing is dedicated to men. There are 2 women there now, and I think there are 28 men at the facility. So, we have responded. And I must say, one of the things about New Hampshire is they always sue us.
They do.
And we don't win many
That seems like
suits.
the way we budget things
Right, we
usually.
don't win
Who
many
sued us
suits.
most
Well,
recently and with the greatest success?
Well,
If
but
we
win
would
some.
budget
special
ahead
ed.
of time, we would win the suits.
Well, and
Yeah.
this is the reason
Yeah,
why we, as a state, we as a general court, both of us, Health and Senate, we need to think about what's right for New Hampshire people. What are our needs? Where are we going? In a long-term plan.
Right.
Our
Well,
mental
my
health
whole
used to
life,
be one of the
attitude has
best.
been, what can we get away with? What's the minimum we can get away with in New Hampshire? And that's why I ask, is it a first-class facility?
Yes.
Because New Hampshire should be a first-class state, just like any other state.
I agree.
And
I
I
agree.
tell you, you drive up and down the east coast of this country, and you can tell when you cross state lines whether they're committed or not to making
And we
things
can
right
do
for the
that
people.
cost-effectively.
I remember when you used to come into New Hampshire and the roads were better. It's not that way anymore.
But we've underfunded our Department of Transportation.
Yeah.
I'm just
Everything.
coming from the Department of Education. I'm excited about the fact that in the House, I'm really proud of our work, that we put $160 million over the biennium. And finally, we are fully funding full-day kindergarten, and it is going to become part of the adequacy formula. And thank you, Senator, for doing the same thing in the House
That's a great
and the
thing,
Senate.
but you know what? The rest of the country is funding pre-K. Where are
I
we?
completely agree with you.
I'm sorry, I know
wholeheartedly.
you guys have worked hard. I know you have, and no one has a better heart than either one of you as far as getting
And
these
they're both
priorities
totally
done.
committed to
I
public education.
don't mean to
both of
criticize
them.
you personally,
Fine.
but
No,
there
no,
is
it's-
so
it-
much work to be done, and we are so far behind the curve that it's utterly frustrating that we're talking about a champion of victory funding kindergarten in
I know.
2019.
And I agree with you completely.
It is a victory, though.
because Preschool,
Well, yeah,
it
it
is
is,
a
it is.
victory. Believe me, I have been fighting this fight for 20 years.
I know you have, Mary, I know you have.
It's
But,
about-
also, we gave money to the university system.
Yeah.
And the governor had, in his budget, had given money for specific things. And we always have agreed that the university system has a board. They need funding, and we give it to them, and they make the decisions about how it's to be used. And in the budget that we sent to the Senate, we have an agreement with the university system that they can't freeze it the first year of the biennium, but the second year of the biennium, they will freeze tuition. I mean, our university is one of the most expensive in the country,
Here we go again.
and yet we're still
But we can't
struggling.
do it this year, we gotta do it next year.
But we're coming, remember in years gone by, the university system was cut
was
by
decimated.
so much.
Back in
So much.
in the O'Brien
And
years.
we
Brian,
still
yeah.
haven't brought them back to where we were.
That's my point.
So-
O'Brien destroyed
He-
the system, and it's taken us 10 years to evolve out of it. I mean, when you think of what happened when he was Speaker of the House of Representatives, it was the most disastrous 2 years in the history of our state. Reduced the cigarette tax by 10 cents and said you'd make up for it in more sales. It was absolute idiocy personified.
Which never happened, of course.
Right, right.
You know,
And
my dream
so-
is that bipartisan, we come together and we say, what do we need to do in our state? We are a great state, but we're
But the
slipping.
problem is you're
We're
dealing with people
slipping
who, the answer is nothing. We don't need to do anything.
who don't believe in paying anything.
They don't believe in anything.
Taxes are theft, is what they say in
Oh,
the House of Representatives.
That is
Well,
just the
they
most
must
despicable
bushwhack through the trees to get to Concord because they don't drive on roads, right? Because roads cost money.
Well, you know, we've made some significant strides, and you know, I Senator Roush from Derry, we got the 4.2 increase in the gasoline tax,
Yeah.
which was a miracle, to
Which
be
was
honest
the
with
first
you.
increase
I
in
agree.
First increase
Since
in, what,
1991,
oh,
I
yeah,
think.
And
By the way, gas prices did not skyrocket.
No, and as a result of that, we have 93 almost complete. It will be
Yeah.
complete, and that's something needed. We had a wonderful person over at the Department of Transportation who got us the TIFIA grant,
Yeah.
and the TIFIA grant, well, it's a loan, the TIFIA loan, which we borrowed $200 million from the federal government, low interest loan, and we're going to do repaving in the rural areas of the state of New Hampshire, much needed. So we've done some creative, innovative things.
She is amazing.
here.
The Commissioner of the Department of Transportation, we are so fortunate to have
She
her.
does a
It's
she does a
remarkable.
good job. Yeah.
So here's
So we've done a
And we
lot.
keep her.
Yes, well.
Here's a
we'll
couple
keep it.
things that both the House and the Senate plans have agreed on, that we should not go forward the next round of business tax cuts.
Yes,
We
You
absolutely
both agree with
Right,
that.
yeah, solid.
And the second big thing that I think you both agreed on is that we should have a paid family and medical leave provision in our
Agreed.
law.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a Senate
Now,
position.
you know, you
It's
have
the
your
House's-
differences on
Yes.
amounts and
Yes,
other
we do.
but those are two big things you agree on,
Yep.
and yet I'm very concerned. I'm not so concerned that the House and the Senate won't reach an agreement in the Committee of Conference. I think, there's a lot of common area
Right, right.
of
Commonality,
belief
yeah.
and priorities that you share. You just demonstrated that tonight. But what I'm worried about is that, with those two things, the probability of will there be a gubernatorial veto, and what would that mean? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, first of all, I think the governor's veto would really be disastrous.
And I agree.
I mean that sincerely. We have had continuing resolutions. We did it under Benson, and that was the craziest continuing resolution we ever had because we spent more in the continuing resolution than we did in the budget that he vetoed. So you,
Right.
you can understand
I'd
that.
forgotten that,
That
but
was
I
a
guess
bit of
that's true.
wackiness.
Yeah.
But Governor Hassan vetoed the budget, and we suffered there. And
She did not
because
achieve
they-
her objectives
no,
with that.
No, she did not achieve her objectives.
But we came back.
But we came
we
back
settled it.
and settled it. But there was no need for that veto, in my opinion. And I'm a strong supporter of Senator Hassan, Governor Hassan, but there's no need for that veto. If the governor vetoes this budget, all of the work that has been done in the area of mental health, in the area of safety, in the area of education,
Of education. I
Child
agree.
protection.
child protection, things that are desperately needed,
Assistance to our departments of
just
state.
right, just lie flat. And here's the most critical issue: the pay raise that we approved for our state employees will have to be paid for out of the lapses, because there's no money going forward if you have a continuing resolution. So those things are just not good. Think of the morale of the state, the morale of our employees, but most important, the morale of our public, who at this point in time is expecting good things. I think the public has a good feeling about what's happened at the legislature, and they're expecting good things.
Well, for the
We had-
longest time, during the tough times, we were told, you can't have anything, you can't do anything, we can't have anything, we can't borrow money, even though it's cheap now because it's a recession, we can't do a darn thing. Well, now times are looking better.
Yeah,
And we
it's-
expect now that all that we've been waiting for, let's get started on those.
Well, you're exactly right. And you've got the same kind of a problem with a lot of money as you do without any money.
Well, and we're playing
and
catch
that-
up because
and-
we were so,
Right.
the 10-year mental health plan is so critical. And I don't know if you attended any of those sessions, the public sessions. They were heartbreaking to listen to families.
These are real things that really
Yes.
happen.
Whose children were taken out of school in handcuffs and brought to the emergency room where they stayed for 10 days. And then they finally got a bed in the state hospital. They were treated, then released with no services.
No follow-up.
So the cycle begins again. But now these new units, the mobile units
The mobile
that have been
units, yeah.
proposed,
Right.
those will provide the help that families need. And
Yeah,
I
we
know.
talked about that on one of our
I
shows
think
with
in our version, we had 5. In the Senate version, they have 9.
But we,
They will reach the people that need it the most.
when they need it.
Yes,
It's not an
that's
issue that can wait
important.
either, it's an emergency situation.
We've tried to, with the transitional housing. And,
Yes,
I mean,
the
all-
transitional housing is critical.
Very, very critical issue. But I think we've tried to do that, and we'll come to a meeting of the minds.
And the moderate income housing,
We've got
which
money
we're
in there.
desperate for in New Hampshire.
We've got $5 million
Yes.
in our
Now,
budget.
what does that do?
added
How does
5
the
million.
state, do you provide, does that lower interest for developers? How does the state
the-
money
Go-
help
okay.
develop moderate income?
The money goes to the New Hampshire Housing Authority. they say that that investment produces a 7-to-1 return. And what they do is they find developers and they work with these developers to produce the moderate income housing. And it's desperately needed.
You know, I'm
Desperately
going
needed.
to interject something
Sure.
really quick because there's so
Please.
much to talk about. But I work in construction in the
Right.
Boston market, and if you build high-end housing in Boston, you must allocate a certain amount for moderate income, either within the building or on the block, buy another building and renovate it. But you have to provide workforce housing if you're going to provide any housing at all.
We haven't been very lucky in New Hampshire with that. kind
Well,
of
we don't have the
legislation.
leverage that the
Well, and
Boston
young
market
people
has. But
aren't
the point
moving
being
here for
that
that reason.
the issue is an important one.
It's
It's
critical.
one that the city of Boston is recognizing, and you see a lot, I bet you there's more cranes in Boston than the whole state of New Hampshire.
New Hampshire is the second
question.
oldest state in the country.
Right.
Our young people
need to bring
aren't
people in.
staying. We need young people to move here. It's impossible practically to find nurses.
It is.
Filling our nursing homes with appropriate staff. Finding mental health workers who
Yeah.
will fill these positions.
Yeah, who's going to
It's
take
a
care of us all as we
difficult-
age out?
Right, right. Well,
So
it's highly
we've
problematic.
got to
Sure.
solve this somehow, and moderate income housing is critical. A young person, 29 years old, not only are they strapped with high college debt, they also can't find a moderate income house. It's impossible. Or rent that is
Even the rental
appropriate.
market is
Well, the
really
rental market's
skyrocketing.
tough.
4,000
Listen,
units short in the
Just-
city of Manchester.
Let me tell you that.
So that raises another whole big
a
issue
big
that
issue.
I don't know
Major.
whether the House and the
Yep.
Senator agreed on this, but I was very surprised today to read that the Commissioner of Health and Human Services had some pushback on I think it's in the House, isn't it, Mary, that we would finally upgrade the reimbursement rate for our
Oh, SB
caregivers,
5,
for our,
you mean the
our
veto?
people in
Well,
assisted
the-
living. And,
I,
how about that?
well, I don't know if you're referencing a letter that he wrote, but what in the Senate, what we did is we put two rate increases in place, 3.1% in the first year and 3.1% in the second year, which totals with the general fund revenue and the match, $112 million worth of help in terms of increasing the rates.
Which we badly need.
Yeah,
Oh,
sure,
desperately.
sure. But I mean, when you throw around 112 million, that's fairly significant increase. Now, is it enough? You know, there's never enough.
Right.
There's never enough.
Right.
But 112 million is not a bad thing. At the same time, you're creating jobs in the area of health and human services that need to be filled. You still have the 15% premium that we're paying for nurses because nurses are so hard to find. So we're doing a number of things. But the most important thing from my standpoint is sustainability. All of these good things we're doing have to be sustained. You can't do
Yeah,
it
if
for
they go
2
away
years.
in 2 years, it's
Yeah,
not,
they
it's
gotta
not
be
gonna
Well,
work.
sustained.
and
That's
that's
the
why
key.
in the House, we were worried about that just as well. And I mean, that's why we moved to the capital gains tax. And we said this would be a tax that would impact the fewest number of people, but in turn would provide revenue that would impact the greatest number of people
And
in our
also,
schools
that
across
few
the
number
state.
are best able to pay it. It's not hitting
Exactly,
people unable to
exactly.
pay. It is hitting the people that are
So
best
why
able
did
to
Senate
pay.
Finance not go along with this?
Well, we thought there was a better way to do it. So we did tax reform, and we did stabilization in terms of the tax reductions. Look at it's very difficult for people to understand how $150 billion of revenue is going to be paid by very few people. Try selling that one downtown.
Yeah, I know.
You know, I mean, let's face it.
Taxes are theft, yeah.
And don't forget, I bought a home in Manchester for $17,500. That's worth a lot more than $17,500.
One would hope.
in the open market.
Yeah.
So that's a capital gain,
Yeah.
and you pay on that capital gain.
But not everybody pays. There are exemptions. There
Right.
are
Right.
thresholds.
Right. Brother Foley, that's the story of taxation. Nobody pays but the other guy.
Well, Bob's favorite poem: "Don't tax you, don't tax me."
Don't tax me, tax that man behind the tree.
But the dilemma is,
It is a dilemma.
somehow, some way, we've got to start the conversation about coming up with some sustainable
Right.
sources of revenue
Yeah, I got to
that
tell you,
really
I
benefit the people
never
of
understood
New
that
Hampshire.
income that people don't work for, that just kind of accumulates from their investments, is taxed at a lower rate than where they put their blood and sweat into it. To
We
me,
are a
if
very
you put,
wealthy state.
if I'm putting my blood and sweat into it, I should get a break, not the guy that's sitting on an easy chair, in a house that he bought in 1965. No offense, Senator.
That's okay.
Well,
But
what's-
we do pay the interest and dividends
What's
tax
the
in New Hampshire.
concern right now is the people my age are doing okay. A lot of people moved to New Hampshire because of our current
Yep.
tax structure, and many of them are very, very well off. Our young
We have
families,
the wealthiest state. We had this differentiation. The income's a little different, but as far as money in the bank, we're the richest state
but
per
our
capita
young
in the country.
families are not.
That's why we ought to.
And in our
do
our
something
city of
about
Manchester, the average rate of poverty of our young families is rapidly increasing. And it's compounded by the opioid crisis, by what's going on, just
Student debt levels?
student debt levels. So our young people are being so impacted. And the people who can better pay, well, taxation is theft, as our colleagues on the other side of the aisle
It
say.
just drives me nuts every time I hear it. I don't like to hear you say it, Jen.
But ultimately, it breaks my heart because we are such a wonderful state. And we've always been a shining star across our states. And we are starting to slip. New Hampshire was number one in education for years. When I was deputy commissioner, we were number one, but then we slipped. Massachusetts made some really strategic moves in terms of funding public education, and they are number one. Number one.
Well,
We
that's
have
an
moved down.
experiential
I didn't know
answer
that.
to the question of whether increasing money leads to better results, and I think that's an experiential answer to that.
A little tip of the hat to the university system by creating the Granite Scholars Program.
Absolutely.
If you have a Pell Grant, if you get a Pell Grant, you're a New Hampshire student, you qualify, you get free tuition for 4 years if you maintain
Yeah.
a quality grade average. Now, I believe 285 kids were involved in that in the first year of its
Yeah.
existence. That's a 10-stroke for
absolutely.
the
And then our state
university
scholar
system.
program.
We are
Thank
very-
you for
Scholars program.
We are very
increasing the
blessed. We
scholarships
have-
for them.
Right.
2 level 1 research
Yes.
higher institutions in New
Yes.
Hampshire, Dartmouth and UNH.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And
That's something we all should be proud of. And
very much so.
I thank both of you for your commitment
We
to
never got to
higher
put up the
education.
big poster, Bob.
We never got to put up the big poster.
Oh, we all done
This-
already?
this
We
is
are-
done. We didn't
the hour
even-
has
We
come
usually
and
take
gone.
2 breaks,
Right.
so we're done. And go Bruins out there.
Yeah, go Bruins
You can
is
all
right.
go forget all this, or don't forget it, but put it aside to think about tomorrow.
Contact the governor. Tell him don't veto this
Don't
budget.
veto this budget.
We're going to give him
The
a
House
really
and
nice
Senate will-
budget.
will come up with a good budget for the
They
next
will.
biennium.
Right.
Let it become law.
Right.
Thank you both for being
Oh,
here. It's
thank
been
you.
a lot of
Thank
fun.
Thank you,
And
thank you,
thank you,
Mary.
Senator.
Thank you, Mary. Mary is going to get this magnificent award for her service, her continuous service. And I must say, I've never worked with a finer person when she was the Deputy Commissioner of Education.
Yep.
And it
But
was
not
a
anymore,
tough-
though, right?
It was a tough budget. She left public service to do public service.
We still agree on more things that we don't agree on.
Well, that's a
And
great
the
thing.
That-
House and Senate,
That is clear.
we are together on most
Most
things.
things.
You're both,
It's
you're
just-
both, you're both
it's
pro
the
education.
how.
Yeah.
I'm
All
very
right,
proud of
everybody.
both of
This
us.
wraps up the latest
We gotta
edition
go.
of the Progress Report.
Sorry I never got to use my chart, but maybe next time about how the House budget is better for the property tax rate in Manchester.
Good night. Enjoy
night.
to be with you all.